You know,
All right, welcome everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, May 26, 2021. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Due to the impacts of the COVID-19 virus, some aspects of the open meeting law have been suspended. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, limited attendance of members of the public will be permitted at an in-person school committee meeting. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. Anyone attending an in-person meeting will need to wear a mask covering their nose and mouth and maintain 6 feet of distance from others at all times within the meeting room. If you are uncomfortable attending the school committee meeting in person but wish to have your thoughts shared during citizens' request, please send an email to school-committee@westboroughk12.org anytime before 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting and indicate that you would like your message read aloud for the public record. Any votes we take this evening will be roll call votes. I'd also like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. And thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Jarrett, School Committee members Sarah Dulé, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan. Our student representative Kyla Kamugu is here. Our recording secretary Jen Benton. We have staff from Westborough TV handling the broadcast and the recording of this meeting, and we have some guests in attendance as well, so it's nice to see some audience members here. And I will review our agenda. So our agenda for this evening is as follows. We'll have approval of minutes from May 12th, 2021 regular session. We'll do a recognition of a Girl Scout Gold Award and perhaps an Eagle Scout as well. We'll see if they come. Then we'll move on to the superintendent's report, reports from the assistant superintendent, school committee member reports, building project updates, citizens' requests, COVID-19 impact update, which will have some general updates. We'll look at some new guidelines about masks and think about staffing and planning of ESSER funds. We'll look at the first tier recommendations from the Literacy Committee. We'll look at a draft of the annual stipend list. We will review student handbooks for next year. We'll do an update to a face coverings policy, EBCFA, that we adopted at the beginning of the year. We will vote on our school committee meeting dates for the 2021-2022 school year, and we'll finish with a summary of the superintendent's self-evaluation. So we will begin with an approval of minutes. We're going to approve the minutes from May 12th, 2021 regular session. Is there a motion for that?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes from May 12th, 2021.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion of the minutes? All right, we'll do a roll call vote to approve them.
Dulé, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durrett, yes.
And Vincent, yes. 5-0, so those are approved. So we'll move into our recognition of a Girl Scout award. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Bach, who has all the details.
Thank you very much. Again, we find it such a pleasure to be able to return to these in-person celebrations of work that contributes to the Westborough community. Aditri Rajara Kupati is here with us tonight, and it's a pleasure to welcome her and her family to celebrate her attainment of the Girl Scout Gold Award. We know that this is a high-level achievement that is a culmination of many years of service in the community and personal growth and learning, and it is always an honor to recognize this level of service in a young person. Aditri actually did a project that contributed to our youth. She created and implemented a virtual summer day camp experience for elementary school students to improve their awareness of basic first aid, nutrition, and the importance of healthy activities in their lifestyle to provide them with a sense of lifelong benefit and health. She worked with partners to pull together and to then market and to make available the actual implementation of the day camp, and I think it represents a truly unique and special contribution. So I would open it up at this time to see if you have any questions for Aditri, or we would actually bring her up then and do her certificate awarding and a photo.
Well, congratulations. And I did have a question, so could you come up to the front table so we can ask you a question? Thanks, you can have a seat. So did I hear correctly, it was a virtual camp that you did?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be a in-person camp, but obviously due to the circumstances with COVID, it had to be a virtual camp this year. But we're hoping that in the future, like in the coming years, we can do a in-person summer camp, because it is an annual summer camp that's going to be run by like other volunteers. So yeah, it's just this year is on through Zoom, but in coming years it will be in person.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that it's going to become an annual thing, and I'm sure it took a lot of work to switch from in-person to virtual.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
What inspired you to start the club and then to decide to create a camp? I was just curious.
Well, it was just mostly my passion for healthcare, because I've always been really interested in health, and I just like reading articles about health and just learning about health and like spreading health awareness. So when I learned that like not a lot of elementary school students were educated about health, I wanted to do something about it, so that's how I created the camp.
So as always, you see an array of individual personal self-growth and interest-inspiring projects, and those are our favorite kind, the ones where the project is a growth of their journey. And I think that this project represents such a nice example of that. So what we would like to do is have Aditri come forward, and you guys can come out and we'll do a photo.
If you want it, yeah.
The photo part, so it's as easy. You're going to come up here, and if you just want to come forward, you're going to go. Congratulations, I'll have you shake your hand. And I'll give you the award. And some people on either side here. Yeah, let's one with masks up, and then we'll do masks down and do what we say, all right? So first with our masks off. All right, so everybody, we're going to do Thank you. We're immensely proud of you. Next up, graduation. You got a lot coming out. I know. We'll see you at the laureate and everything. Congratulations. You should be immensely proud. We look forward to seeing you at graduation next. You know, if you go through these doors here, you'll be able to go around. And I was like, I didn't know that we were. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's true.
A truck? I'd be open.
So if Amrit arrives, we'll take a pause and be able to award his as well. He
Sure.
did a really interesting project, and if we can get an opportunity to celebrate him, we will.
Yeah, definitely. It just feels so good to be able to get back to some of these in-person recognitions. It's not the same over
Definitely.
Zoom.
I know.
Moving on in our agenda, actually, Amber, it's you, you're up again.
Yes,
for
I'm
your
going to stick with
superintendent's
my
report.
introductions and celebrations.
great.
So I am immensely pleased tonight to have opportunity to introduce you formally to David Gordon, our newly announced and hired Director of Finance and Administration for the Westborough Public Schools. I am very, very pleased to have David joining us. I'll tell you a little bit about some of his trajectory career-wise and why his opportunity to join us is a huge benefit for us. And then Dave's going to talk a little bit about just letting you get to know him a bit. So Dave actually is DESE licensed as school business administrator, and he joins us with an array of experience that's quite impressive. He had 5+ years as a financial analyst at Verizon. He then did some nonprofit work at MIT. He also then moved on to public school work and worked for the Boston Public Schools for 5 years in a variety of very diverse and interesting financial roles that led him to director of budget and management and data work, as well as statistical analysis and work with special education, facilities, and food services, as well as athletics. So the array of budgeting work that he was able to explore in Boston leaves him more than well prepared to take on the scope of Westborough's work. Dave was then recruited and was a financial director in Somerville for several years before he took a transitional year off to have some family time with the arrival of a baby. And from there, he worked and has been and is coming to us from the Director of Finance and Operations at 10 Acre, which is a private day school. So the opportunity when he applied, we felt very, very fortunate that we were able to be a match, and that David, after careful consideration, finds Westborough a district where he believes he can both contribute his talents and also enjoy the array of solid colleagues and nice work environment that we try to provide here. So welcome, David, and I'll turn it over to you if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Superintendent Bach. David Gordon, I think the best way to say is I'm extremely excited to be here. I thought it would be beneficial for the committee to get to know a little bit about me personally. I'm a dad, married to a physician assistant in Framingham, born and raised in Framingham. She is a physician's assistant in the surgery department at Metro West Medical. I have 2 children. My daughter, Kana, just turned 5 on Saturday. And I have a son, Griffin, who is 2 and will be 3 in mid-June. Probably the best thing to do is talk a little bit about the work. My personal philosophy, which I think aligns well with Westborough, is student-centric. As a finance director, we are forced to, make difficult decisions, but for me, it's always making sure that the students are immune to some of the hard decisions and the tasks from central office. So that's really the goal. That's really my goal, is to make sure that the financial stewardship exists, the prudency exists, but in doing all that, students are in the bubble and remain pretty abstained from any kind of impact that we have at the central office. In addition to that, I work very collaboratively. I'm looking forward to engaging with not only administration, but district leaders, principals, program leaders, and not only working to benefit students, but hearing their needs and trying to respond to those. So that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think my past has said that I've been pretty critical of myself in making sure that happens. In addition to that, I'm just very excited to bring, again, the what I consider finding my, finding really my niche, really what I'm happy to do and love to do, and bringing that to Westborough. So I'm very excited about partnering with Superintendent Bach, Assistant Superintendent Mayor, and just really making things in a district that's great, maybe slightly a little bit better, but working to, progress. and hearing all of my constituents' needs and making sure that everything gets addressed in the appropriate manner. I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to my official start in July.
We had a really nice day today. We kept it informal and really relationship-centered, so I took him to the borough. I took him around to each of the schools, and we visited a few. He joined us for leadership team today, and we structured it for circled opportunities to visit and to connect and talk. He then had some opportunity to talk to Forbes team people and do some planning with us for his entry in July. So a productive day and probably tiring because we've been busy all day. But I would open it up again for any comments, and we'll finish, and then we'll send Dave home to rest.
Well, welcome. We're really glad you were able to spend the day here in the district and then join us tonight so we can meet you and so that the community can also meet you
Great.
as well as they can through a TV screen.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm sure 10 Acre is going to miss you. So if I had to ask you one question, since I wasn't there for your interview, I would like to ask you, what was it that stood out when you were thinking about coming to Westborough? Because I'm pretty sure you did your homework.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really about, I spent a lot of time really looking at the strategic plan, and I thought a lot of that really resonated with me. There's a hyper focus not only on student, but overall diversity, equity, inclusion, equality for students, and just the growth of the district overall. It's kind of bittersweet to leave one place and go to another, but when you think about the skill sets that you bring and the opportunity to create, continued growth and change, plus the interview process, in the conversations I had with Superintendent Bach, really kind of drove it home for me. It's kind of that total symmetry of feeling like the stars aligned, the job got posted, you went through the process, and you got a really good feeling, from your gut, which is critical for me. And that got reinforced by some really good conversations I had with Superintendent Bach about it. So, I mean, when you talk about Kismet, that was it.
That's awesome. Anyone else have questions or anything, comments?
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the two who interviewed you along with Lisa.
Yeah.
So, frankly, I interviewed 3 candidates, and I was impressed by you the most. And once we came out, me and Lisa looked at each other, and we both said, he's really good.
Good. I'm glad.
So welcome aboard. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to working with you.
Thank you. I'm very excited, very excited.
So we will have nice opportunities for you to get to work closely with Dave and get to know him. I look forward to returning to, our fall retreat structure where we get some extended time to do the kind of both reflection and connection that keeps you guys a strong committee and forges us forward as a district. So again, I'm exceptionally happy that we could introduce Dave to you tonight, and we have good work ahead.
Yeah. And I understand there'll be some transition with Irene, so you'll be able to work with her a little bit in order to kind of, get yourself up to speed over the summer. So
Yeah, I think that I think that's critical to my success, and Superintendent Bach has set up a great opportunity for the transition and the overlap.
yeah, I'm glad that works out. So great, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
And good luck finishing out your school year at 10 Acre.
Thank you very much.
When's
A
the
unique year.
when's the last day over there?
Actually, June 11th.
Okay,
Yeah.
so a little bit sooner than us.
Working now to figure out kind of issues we caused by the COVID caused, and planning strategically for next year of how we open the doors. And I think like everyone else, just trying to
Sounds
get back to
Sounds
normal.
familiar.
We're all in the same boat. But again, it's been a challenge, but at the same time, you learn a lot through each experience and, some of the past, and I'm excited to bring that here and continue to grow, so it's all exciting.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much. And you're definitely welcome to leave and go home, and I know it's been a
Thank
long
you
day.
very much. It's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, my question, since I wasn't at your
Sorry.
interview, is what is your familiarity with the financial software that we use here in Westborough?
So historically used Munis in Somerville. Very strong Microsoft Office person, whether it's Excel and budgeting tools and things like that. And we actually discussed a little bit today the kind of reacquaintance to Munis and some of the Munis updates. So bringing some of the history that I have, being able to close the gap, and then working with Suzanne and the district about getting upkeep on regrooming myself to Munis and its functionalities is probably going to be the least of the transition that I'm worried about, just because of my experience with it.
It's good. Well, I'm not worried either, but obviously it's an important thing that you need to be able to do. And the other question I had is, what specifically did you do at MIT in this regards?
Sure. At MIT, I was the business manager for Sloan Management Review. That's a publication that's pretty close to the Harvard Business Review, not quite at the volume, but was there. Unfortunately, I was at MIT at the time when the 2010 recession hit. So MIT was fortunate enough, they had some transition in the journal itself. But I'd like to think because of some of the good work I did, they placed me at the School of Engineering, where I was the business manager for the short programs, certificate-based programs where we'd bring in professors and they would partner with Novartis and other kind of local pharmacies and agencies to basically run certificate programs. So I did a lot of revitalization, reduce inefficiencies, and kind of manage the budget over there. And then from there, I got actually recruited into MIT Lincoln Labs in Lexington, which is similar to Raytheon, did a lot of budgeting for essentially the Department of Defense.
Were you involved at all in their energy discussions in terms of the power plant and the rest of the stuff?
No, nothing like that. No, when I was at Lincoln Labs, my program was it was a space net, so we did some of that. So
Very good.
And time at MIT was great. That really was the transition, and then really what opened my doors for me finding my niche and what I love to do was working at Boston Public Schools and just being able to say, strong financial background, and then really what connects the dots is the kids. So for me, it all came to, full circle.
Great. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a great evening.
Enjoy the rest of the night. We'll be in touch.
All right, so anything else, Amber?
No,
It's
that's
a
my
pretty big
report for tonight. We have plenty going on, so I'll keep you moving
Okay,
forward.
great. No, there's lots to report on later on in the agenda, too. Danielle?
Nothing to report on right now.
Great. So we will move on to our school committee member reports, and I am sad to announce that it is Kyla's last day with us, but that means that she's this much closer to graduation and all that. So I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to share with us about, the seniors and kind of closing out the year.
Yesterday was the last day of seniors. I wasn't there, unfortunately, but I heard it was really good and everyone really appreciated the activities the school put on. Other than that, I do not, unfortunately, have any reports. People are just preparing for final, I think, MCAS, because the middle school has MCAS, so people are just really getting ready for that. I do not have any more reports, unfortunately.
Well, we just want to say thank you so much for all your contributions this year. You have enriched our school committee discussions and our knowledge and your perspectives, bringing that knowledge from the high school to us so we can better understand the experiences there have been really, really rewarding. And so we have a couple things for you just to say good luck and goodbye.
Oh, wow.
For you, and there's a card there. You have to open it. You have to open it.
I do? Okay. Okay.
It's a tradition.
Yep.
Oh, this is a graduation card. Thank you. Yes, it's my first one. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank my principal, Mr. Callahan, for giving me the opportunity to be here and be part of this, and help bridge the gap between the committee and the students by voicing their concerns and trying to find a better way to like work with everyone. It's been an honor coming to the meetings despite how long they were. And the transition in person, seeing all you beautiful people who are working to make our community better. And I do hope the person who takes after me next year continues with the same spirit, same role. Yeah, thank you.
You have to have a good cuddle blanket at college, and so you've got your Westborough W to take with you.
Perfect.
It's good, I love it.
It's actually my initial.
Those are very popular. The teachers
my
have to
middle
be
name.
here
It's
for
like
10 years to get one, so you
is it your-
definitely, they're a hot commodity.
Is it the, did you say it was the colors for UMass?
No, it's actually like my middle initial, like W, so it works either way.
Long
It works
time.
either way.
And we couldn't let you go by without getting something sweet.
They also sell those in Williamstown.
Yeah,
So much.
You're
It's been a
welcome.
pleasure.
you are
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on with school committee member reports. And Sarah, do you have anything?
I just want to thank Kyla again for her service here. It was nice when we switched to in-person meetings and we got to know her a little better. It was, I know it was tough in the beginning on the small screen, so it was nice to see you, be next to you here. So thank you. And like you said, I hope we got a quality replacement for you. I just have one quick, I don't know if anyone got to go to the center stage Night Under the Stars on Friday night. It was incredible. The performances, so nice to see everyone back performing. There was freshmen that made their debut.
Yeah.
There were seniors that got to sing Evita. I'm not gonna lie, I was crying. It was awesome. So I was so glad they got to do that. And there's so many more concerts and stuff, like too much to name. So I'm just glad everyone's getting their chance to sing and dance and have fun. So
It was really nice.
it was really good.
Yeah, I was there Saturday.
The performances are on Westborough TV as well, so
Yes.
we couldn't make one of them, but we were able to watch it on Westborough TV, so that was great. Yeah, really nice. Yeah, it's exciting to, and I know that one of the neighbors over there had said, like, I heard this beautiful singing, and I wasn't sure what it was, and, figured out that it was one of the performances coming back,
Yeah,
so.
it was great.
Yeah, it's great. Raghu, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, thanks, Kyla, for doing such an awesome job representing these students. You took my thunder. I made
sorry.
notes and everything.
It was that good, though.
I would like to thank Ms. Jazz, Ms. Greer, Zach Taylor, everybody who was involved in putting up such a wonderful show. I was impressed. It was really good. It was in that big tent, and
Actually,
Yeah.
too, sorry, that
it almost felt normal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Montage at the end is incredible, too. They put
Yeah.
together kids singing, I don't know, a bunch of different songs. It's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, it was really, makes you cry. Yeah.
So great. What a celebration.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent, oh my goodness. There's a good chunk of graduating seniors going into theater and musical voice, and then a good pack of freshmen coming in with some great pipes, so it's good stuff.
That's awesome. Is there anything else?
Nope,
That's it?
that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lisa?
So just have a couple things. One, Kyla, it's been such a privilege to have you on board here, and I just wanted to say how grateful I was for your email communications to raise concerns that were happening, on the spot. I just, I hadn't experienced that with liaisons in the past, and I just realized that you've boosted the position to such an extent that I think I will, guide a little bit better in the future so that those things do happen more regularly to get feedback. So thank you you really created a change for me that has allowed me to grow. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I also wanted to mention that the bus, we've been meeting with NRT fairly regularly all year, but I wanted to sort of announce that they're working on the summer routes for the summer programs that are happening, but also to mention that their plan for creating routes for next fall there is not going to be a survey that asks whether you're planning to use transportation or not. It will just be considered a normal year, and if you are eligible to be a rider on the bus, as typically is done. At the end of the summer, the routes will be posted, and you will look for your closest stop that's near your home, and that will be your bus route and your bus number. But just wanted to put it out there, they'll be working on those, and it's like a seamless normalcy coming back. And then finally, I wanted to mention a program that's being co-sponsored by the Westborough Public Library, the Westborough Public Schools, and Westborough Connects. They are hosting a virtual screening of a film called I'm Not Racist, Am I? And it's a feature documentary following a diverse group of teens through a year-long exploration to get at the heart of racism. And that is going on Monday, June 7th from 6 to 8:30. It is virtual, meaning on Zoom, and you do need to register. There will be a Q&A session after the film with the director, Catherine Wigginton. So it's sort of, I believe that because it's virtual, it sort of created another opportunity to be able to connect with the director. So that is a really wonderful program coming up, and register ahead of time. And that's all I have for tonight.
Yeah. Steve, anything now, or are you all buildings? Okay. So I would like to thank everyone who contributed to the Cradles to Crayons collection drive. The Project 351 team and their friends sorted all the items on Saturday and ended up with 228 bags of children and adolescent clothes, shoes, books, toys, and baby items. And when I say bags, I mean the huge, clear, plastic trash bags full of stuff. So that helps over 1,000 children here in Massachusetts. So thank you to everyone. And I have a good news story from Facebook to share. On May 17th, there was a post in the We Are from Westborough, Massachusetts Facebook group from a man named James Frawner. He lives in a small town called Elkhart in East Texas, and he posted a few photos of a framed Westborough High School diploma dated June 28th, 1878. And he said he found the diploma in an antique store outside of Eureka Springs in Arkansas, and he wanted to return the diploma back to Westborough. And he was asking online if the library was interested. Does anyone know if Westborough has a museum, or who would be interested? So I jumped in and commented that I'm on the school committee, and I think it would be awesome to have in the Forbes building, because we have so many historic photos of Westborough schools and students hanging in the hallways and in the offices upstairs. So he and I were emailing back and forth, and he said, well, I'll ship it up to you. And he packaged it up so nicely and shipped it, and I have it here. Wow. And it came in this frame and everything, so you guys take a closer look.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said that as he was looking at it, he noticed that the back of the frame was a little loose, and there was a newspaper in there. And the newspaper is from April 16th, 1818. And it's a newspaper, the Daily Evening Traveler, which was published in Boston at the time. And the price on it is 3 cents. So that's still back here. He said it's very brittle, though. So I am in touch with Phil Kittredge, who also worked on a lot of the photos that are here. And so I'm going to hopefully connect with him tomorrow, and he can give us some good advice on making sure this stays, preserved, and how to make sure it will last a really long time.
And the school committee membership is very impressive. Read who's on the school committee.
So school committee has 2 names, and it is someone with the last name of Forbes, and then Sarah Bartlett, I believe is what it says. So I think it's fascinating that in 1878, a woman was on the school committee, and that Forbes in the building that we're in now, named after the Forbes family, is like part of that legacy here. So I look forward to hanging this, and I thank James so much. He said that he's done this before, that he loves to poke around antique shops, and he has found things before and tried to return them to colleges or places like that. So
that's a rare find. That's an old diploma, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So it was great to connect with him, and I love good news. It says good things about Facebook sometimes.
Yeah.
Great, so that was my show and tell. So I'll turn it over to Steve for some building project updates.
What's kind of interesting about that is that it actually spells out the name of the town as Westborough.
Yes.
You know, for a long time, I'd say maybe 50 years, that everybody was lazy and they just had Westboro. And I'd say, it was probably in the late 80s that Chris, as a member of the selectmen, or select people, let's put it that way, decided that we should go back to the long name. And basically, that's the reason why everything now is the full name, which is very interesting. I didn't realize that it actually had been used, and that was the official name of the town.
Yeah, that actually came up on the Facebook site. People were, I thought it was always B-O-R-O, you know, and kind of when did it switch from one to the other. It was really interesting, a lot of history there, so, yeah.
It was very interesting.
Yeah.
So as part of the building project discussion, I want to thank everybody who went to town meeting 2 Saturdays ago, who voted at town meeting. We were done, I think, about 11:30 or something like that, starting at 9, which was unique. There were a couple of areas where we got bogged down, which is always the case, and it's always the ones that have the least money but the most interest, and we spend a long time doing those. But anyway, the 3 articles and 3 components that were part of the school committee's offering to town meeting, the town budget, and 2 other articles were passed. Raghu made his presentation as the first time, I think, before town meeting.
That was my first time.
And I think it was a unanimous vote.
Yeah, it was.
It was, so, very good.
Now, lucky charm, that's good.
So anyway, we thank everybody for going to town meeting, only because I think it's number one, a very interesting thing to do, because finally you see what goes on in the town and how the pieces fit together. But more importantly, it is your government, and if you're not there, then the few actually will create perhaps misery for the many. So it's important that people go to town meeting and do their thing. As far as the building projects are concerned, Fields is moving along now quite quickly, and I'll return to Fields in a minute. We have, as a result of the town meeting vote relative to the sprinkler system at Hastings, we now have the funding necessary to award the contract, and I'm waiting as a member of the school committee to receive the signed contract from the successful bidder, and that work will start soon. Members of the administration are tracking down the exact schedule for work. We have a general schedule information from the engineer, but it's not detailed enough for the school administration to react to yet. But clearly, the work will start as soon as they can get their act together, and hopefully most of it will be done during the summer. Going back to Fails, we have every week a construction meeting discussion, and part of the discussion today was part of what I mentioned the last time we were here, which was a discussion as to when the building would be done, and as a result of the need to get it done, how much overtime would we pay to achieve a given date. As a result of the discussions and review many times over with specific questions with the, not only with the construction manager, but also with the contractors who supply information to the construction manager, we were able to commit to a certificate of occupancy in November the 10th, which allows us now to move from the old school to the new during the Veterans Day weekend. As a result of that change, we were going to spend upwards of $252,000 for overtime to meet an earlier date. And as a result of this later date, we will save potentially most of that money. And I say potentially because we won't commit now to weekend overtime, Saturday and Sunday, in an amount that should save us at least $100,000 of that $250,000 discussion. It will go back into the construction manager's contingency, and if it's not needed for something else, then it'll return to the owner, which is the school department in the town of Westborough. So I think with the cooperation of all the players, including Marianne Standard, who's the principal at Fales, to figure out how these changes might impact the school. And obviously with the follow-up discussion with Amber and her input into the process. So it's $100,000. If it does get spent, it's only because it was needed for something else. And if we're lucky, we won't need it for something else, and we'll be able to use it for things that we cut out of the budget a long time ago in order to meet the MSBA dollar requirement for contributions from the state of Massachusetts. So that's the story today.
So I had a productive planning meeting with Mary Ann. She and I spent some time together last Friday and did a variety of kind of strategic roadmap ways that we would be able to support teachers to have time to pack up space, maintain core instruction, and then have the boxes transitioned, and then time to unpack, all in a very tight time frame. But I think we have a couple models that are workable. She might have presented a little bit about that today at the building meeting, but I feel that we're well leveraged to come up with a structure that would be viable and would get us into that building on the timeline that they provide. So as soon as we finalize that, Marianne and I will be putting out a communication to families and to faculty. We're close, but I think we're waiting to kind of finalize everything and then communicate.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question?
I gave the opportunity for Marianne as well as the Vertex, our consultant, to have the last minute, so we'll close the door tomorrow.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? Is there potential that we could save more than 100,000 out of this 252?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's much more money in the contingency, both in the owner's contingency as well as the construction manager's contingency. But one of the things that we've always found is that it's at the last minute when things pop up that you didn't think existed. So, yeah. I mean, there is more money. If we don't need it for anything else, then we could be returning much more than that, perhaps 10 times that to the town. But again, counting your chickens before they hatch is never something that I do, because you're always surprised at the end.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people have to remember is that we cut approximately $5 to $6 million out of this from the first go-round with bids in the very beginning. And so what we have is an adequate process, but not what we wanted in the beginning. So there's certain things that aren't as good as they could have been. And, there's hope that as we find savings here and there, that we may be able to add back into the program those things that we took away in the beginning.
Any other questions for Steve?
Is it?
All right, so we'll move on to citizens' requests. And Namisha, do you want to come on up? Okay. Yeah, just come on up to this table here, and then you can use the microphone, and we'll be able to hear you better.
Nice to see everyone in person.
I know. I've only seen you on a screen, so it's so nice to see you in person. And for citizens' requests, we just ask that you state your name and your street address.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Nimisha Goradia. I live on 81 Townsend Boulevard. I have 2 kids. Both of them go to Fales. And yeah. So I had 2 things to discuss. First was a question that for all the enrichment programs and the summer programs we are offering, the Westborough School is offering, there was a concern, not a concern, but a question amongst a lot of families that will we be following the same guidelines, the school guidelines for social distancing, for COVID protocols? Will that be followed? Or, God forbid, if a child has COVID, then will it be communicated? Will a communication be sent out? And if a family is going out of town in the weekend, like what are the procedures, protocols? So that if a communication can go out.
Yeah, I can, we can have the superintendent.
So I can
address
certainly
it.
give you a brief answer, which is, I just was communicating with Brian Bacon around plans for some of his summer programming through community ed, and he had just gotten approval from the Board of Health for a range of protocols around when they would be masking, what they would be tracking. Similarly, for the summer program, we'll follow school-based protocols for the summer programming that we're running in terms of the academic academy and the special education extended year supports. I imagine, though, at the same time, parts of that programming and part of the protocols are kind of obviously upgrading really quickly. So you saw that we did put out an update on the outdoor guidelines. So I imagine those would be the same. And then the indoor guidelines would follow the school-based protocols that we end with regard to masking inside. That's where things stand currently. I anticipate, we met this week with the Safety Committee, and then our head nurse was meeting with the Board of Health. And my target is to put out probably another communication by Friday on an update to kind of general protocols for where things stand. We were looking for some, I'm going to talk about this when I get to the other stuff. We were waiting on some additional guidance because there was some overlap that didn't make sense between like school-based and then what was going on with CDC. So I certainly think that contact tracing as it needs to exist or any quarantining guidelines, we always follow what the CDC says. And I think they're going to continue to update. So it's going to be an interesting. Typically, we've followed CDC, so I anticipate that through the summer programming, we would, the Safety Committee felt that we should give the head nurse and me the guidance to continue to update the summer protocols against CDC guidelines with Board of Health approval. That was their recommendation. So we'll clarify all of that and then put it out in a communication by the end of the week.
Okay, great. Because as things have started to open up, like for example, my family is conservative. We would rather stick to a program laid out by school versus a private program, which we don't know. So that's why the questions came up, and I just wanted to bring it out there.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I do think as well, the community ed programming that ran this summer, they did incredibly well at a time. They were almost on the forefront for us of helping us find protocols and did a really incredibly good job managing it with no outbreaks on site. And so I think that summer programming is strongly modeled after the school protocols, and it's certainly how we would implement.
Sure, thank you so much. And the other one is, I was going to send out an email, but I thought since there is a meeting, let me come and acknowledge the feelings of the email which was sent out about, I think, a month ago about the COVID crisis in India. It was very well received by the community. It was very well received by all the families, especially the ones which were impacted, because the principal and the teachers were extremely supportive, but it was just creating awareness among the other families. There were a lot of, we know a lot of families from north of India. There was so much crisis going on. Like the kids and the students were exposed to so many things. Like they would get up in the morning and they had like a bunch of bad news, and they would sit with their parents, do FaceTime, write condolence messages, and the anxiety of extended family. So that was very difficult to explain to their friends, their classmates, and their parents. So thanks to the email, the awareness that was created, and people have been very nice, and people have, people, even our own neighbors expressed, like they would send us flowers, and so that was really nice, and we appreciate for creating, for sending that email out.
It's been so upsetting to see so much trauma and at an exponential level beyond when we even look at where we were when New York was in such a similar, the panic phase of just the need for supplies. And so I just think remembering empathy and support is really the best place to start. So thank you. Right. Hopefully we'll see stabilization soon.
Sure. Yeah. But thank you for sending that. I just wanted to come here and thank, and it was heartbreaking to see a lot of families from north of India and their kids go through that, and thanks for that.
Yeah.
That communication.
Thanks.
That's it.
Well, thank you. We're glad that you found it supportive, and and I know it's hard to be so far away when that's happening. So thank you, but thank you for coming tonight. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
thanks for bringing it up. It's been really bad news for everybody who has family in India. Every time we call back home, there's somebody we know who succumbed to the virus. So it's really bad. And thanks for the support and the email. That goes a long way.
Any other citizens' requests? We'll move on to our COVID-19 impact update. So Amber, I'll turn it back over to
No,
you.
this was perfect. So, the opportunity to open up some of that initial conversation to provide an update to you on different practices. So I met on Monday with the Safety Committee, and you've seen several kind of core announcements coming out recently from CDC and also from DESE on updating protocols. It's been a pretty quickly moving train in terms of the shifts at the state level. So typically, we put out the 2 initial updates around the outdoor mask changes and then answered questions and have implemented and kind of watched that protocol to see how it's stabilized. I'm waiting until Judy Noonan, the head nurse, and I are also waiting on a couple updates regarding teacher mask use outside, because it's kind of in contradiction to the CDC guidelines that adults vaccinated can be maskless outdoors, and yet they left the school in a double bind where they're not clear about whether faculty can be without masks outside. And so we would like to see them in alignment, and we were waiting to see if we could get that alignment before we put out an update. It doesn't seem that we're going to get it until after the 29th. So other than that, the other updates will look towards, I know Forbes practices will follow the protocols of the town. The select board talked about that last night and made a motion around mask wearing that Forbes would follow that compliant, same parallel, which would be self-selected choice for vaccinated people to be without masks on site in this public building. School-based protocols will remain the same for now, masks indoors for everyone. And we see that continuing through to the close of the year. The outdoor activities are the arenas where there will continue to be some questions around what the practices are. Graduation, is a big ticket item, and a good communication went out this week, end of last week actually, from Brian regarding how those things will proceed, as well as the memory lane and the baccalaureate night. I know that there's the senior dinner that Lisa had asked about. I'll check with Brian and see what update. I don't know if there's a specific different tweak there that they need to make. Most of the outdoor activities seem to be going very, very well. I think everyone's trying to figure out where they're comfortable with or without masks. So right now, I anticipate that it would follow the same protocol as graduation. And if you looked at self-choice as we saw it under the stars, people are going to move in that direction of being maskless outside. But then the faculty gets left in this double bind, so we're kind of waiting to see what happens. Other than that, the Safety Committee decided that they did not need to meet again between now and summer, and that we would be on hold to reconvene as any new announcements came out around, boundaries for opening in the fall. Similarly, we have leadership team on point to have a weekly standing meeting, as we did last year, that we can activate at any time to begin to respond to information that we receive from DESE. And our labor board, who's been one of our other anchor, again, is comfortable with not having additional meetings between now and the end of the year, but will convene as needed to prepare for opening should there be any questions. So I feel like that's a very positive, advantageous place for us to be. I feel like most questions are coming in at a building-based level, and then we'll do one last big facts update that will go out that I'll do. I think I'll revert back to that. I haven't decided. It depends on how much content we have. I might drop it into that original document and just re-push it because people have gotten used to seeing it, or I'll do a between now to the end of year memo and put the content in there. So one of those two, and push it by Friday. That's my update for now. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have an idea of what percentage of faculty is fully vaccinated at this point?
I haven't gotten a recent count lately. We're way up into 90%. I know even some of our medically fragile or faculty that worked from home this last year are vaccinated because on a rotation return, I think the majority of them are also vaccinated. So I haven't talked to many people that aren't at this point. I think we're in a very, I can ask Judy to run a number, but we're up in the 90% to 100% according to principals when we've asked. We have a good number of students. Again, also the high schools, very high percentage of students. They think up at least around 70% at this point. And they have a good number at Gibbons and Mill Pond starting, lower number at Mill Pond, but starting to come in line as well. So.
Brian wanted me to update you on the senior dinner communication. So I sent you a text.
Okay, there you go.
That it'll go out on Friday. He has a meeting with the senior class officers and advisors to finalize the details tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Brian?
Yeah. Hi, Brian.
That's great. If we could get Brian to answer the other questions, that'd be good.
And then you had also linked into our packet the guidelines from the athletic director about sports and masking, and the MIA had updated
That
guidance
update was
around that
good,
too.
yeah.
So, yep, so that's really helpful.
And one other piece I would add for us is that we had a really robust response of remote families who need to return and have connection. There's a lot of open houses beginning in early June, open hours for people to come in and just be in the building. Opportunities to return for using MCAS actually was an opportunity for students to come back and work in the building for academic settings, open door days on weekends, visiting garden spaces, events outside, multiple classrooms across the grades have had picnic lunches, scheduled PE sessions. At the high school, they've had open building days starting in June from 3 to 4. They're also going to do some invitations to students to come in individually to see the school in action in June, so they get a feeling for what it feels like with students in the building. So a lot of proactive planning around the range of things we would have wanted to see that are being communicated and worked on with families. I think, our remote families at this point have seen that responsiveness that they had asked for, and I think, we'll keep working that forward. So that's my report on COVID updates.
And did you, so I think one of the bullet points we had there was about the ESSER, the staffing and the planning, but is that
So
care about now, or? I know
Irene. So we worked on staffing today, and I'd rather do a more concrete memo when I have Irene here to back up the money with you. But right now, the funding looks like we'll be able to leverage some of ESSER 2 and part of ESSER 3 while I'm maintaining a planned $200,000 hold aside on ESSER 3, waiting to see what they do with remote. So the state is somewhat silent right now on what they keep saying more guidance coming, but that always makes me a little afraid. So we're gonna hold ESSER funds to wait and see, but a good portion of ESSER 3 would be committed to staffing. There's some moving parts on that happened today, so I didn't want to be kind of doing public record on positions yet. So I think at our last meeting, we should be able to share a memo update and give you a sense of the positive impact of what that does for numbers and student support. Thank you. Sorry, I should have.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to check in to make sure we wouldn't skip over it. No, that makes sense to just think ahead on that.
And we haven't had any COVID cases releases for 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
So, the number of vaccination in our students is what's carrying that.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, but, as K to 3 parents have gotten vaccinated, we see a dip in the K3 rate, which had been rising. So very, very good news, just to look at the trends of where we are, and then we just all hope it holds.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I know I noticed even the townwide numbers were like 7 or 3, so very, very low rates. All right, so any other questions about COVID-19 impact updates that you have for Amber? Right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item is our first tier recommendations from the Literacy Committee. This was sort of on pause to receive these, and so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so, the whole thing sort of went on pause because of COVID, so that's why it was on pause. You have a memo in your packet that I'm going to summarize just some parts of, but you do know the history in that back in March 2019, we started down the road of, we formed the committee. There's over 37 faculty who participated, from special needs faculty to reading specialists to K through 6 classroom teachers. Amber, myself, Sherry Stevens, we're all on it, and all the building principals from the K6 are on the committee. So it's it was a very intense group, very committed group. We started our work and had fully intended by the end of the 2020 school year. So last June was our target date to get a final report. And so in March, when we had to close down and we everything had to be put on hold, and with all the crisis planning during the course of this year, we couldn't really reconvene the committee until recently. So basically in May, just earlier this month, and the 4th, we brought the committee back together. And we had made a lot of progress, and we were ready to make some interim recommendations rather than waiting for us to make our final recommendations, because there was a sense of urgency about getting some things up and running next year, rather than waiting for an entire new school year to go by us. But we didn't feel like we could produce a final report with just reconvening in May. There's too many things on everyone's plate. So we're going to meet again next month, and then we may meet over the summer, and we'll meet in early fall, and the final report will be delivered in the fall to the school committee. But what we are ready to do, there's some background information here about the committee and the framework that we're using to look at reading and important things like that. But I think the purpose of at this point of our discussion is the recommendations of the committee. And so I want to highlight there's 4 main recommendations. One is that we adopt a phonics program in K through 2 that we use. It's a standardized program. We do have a phonics curriculum. It's very well spelled out in terms of what our expectations are. It has been in place for years, but it's different to have an actual program and the resources that are there with the program. And so under the circumstances that we're in order to get that program launched by the fall, we need to actually select what program we're going to use. And so what might have taken place during this school year, which would be piloting and sort of dabbling and then full implementation next year, we're hyper-speeding in some sense to do the selection of the program over the summer. We have committee members that are, some of the people are already on this current committee, but we're asking for other people to participate. And during the month of July, we're going to engage in a very robust analysis of a couple of different programs. There's some obvious ones that are out there that we've got at least 2 or 3 that are on the table. But there will be a selection and then a professional development implementation plan put together over the summer, so that by the beginning of next year, we will start using the program. And whenever you start with a new program, it does take a little time to ramp up and to get to know it, but we were very clear, the committee was clear that they wanted to make sure that it was a full implementation year. So we're excited by that. We're looking forward to it, so it's well on the way. Then, any questions about that particular piece before I move on to the other recommendations? I mean, you can always circle back to it too if you want.
yeah.
Okay. So, and so, just by the way, some of the programs that we're going to be looking at, we will actually, in the summer program, we'll do some piloting with it with our students who are here this summer.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah, so we're excited to be able to do that. And then the other recommendation that the committee had made and we started acting on already was using the DIBELS test as an early screener for helping identify kids that are struggling with some of the elements that are essential to be able to learn to read, like letter identification, high frequency words, nonsense words, and be able to get a sense of were there any early flags that we need to pay attention to, and then how do we go? We basically, the earlier we identify, the easier to remediate, the reduction in the likelihood that a student will have to get referred for specialized support. And so we started using the DIBELS last year in grades K and 1. We're going to make sure that it's expanded to, and this year we did. Was it last year? It was 19-20 school year was K1, and then this year it was K1-2. And we will use it for all students in kindergarten through grades 2 at a few points, at least 2, maybe 3 points, I think 3 points during the year. And then students who are in grades 3 through 5 would get it if we would use the assessment if they're struggling in some way with their reading, so it wouldn't be a universal screener. That's the second recommendation of the committee. And then, there's a difference between a phonics program and a phonological awareness program. Phonological awareness is the ability to detect or manipulate the sounds and words, and it's been used as a key early literacy skill and precursor to reading. And so in kindergarten, you start to work out using a phonological awareness exercises and programs, having kids, hear when you say cat, what's the letters that are in cat and that you can hear, and they just have to hear it and identify. We have a program that we piloted, again, started it with 2 years ago, and this year we were using the Just Right Phonological Awareness Program in all kindergarten classes. And the recommendation of the committee is that we fully implement it next year, so that will be also be used next year. And then this year we used the Lexia program, which is a subscription program for literacy. It's a computerized program that uses like artificial intelligence to understand whether kids, what their level is, and to move them up depending on how well they progress, or move them down some levels. It keeps data on how the kids are doing. It measures their ability to, on a variety of phenomena like phonics, structural analysis, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. And so they're getting a whole host of literacy skills that are bundled in there. It was particularly important for us to have it this year with the students working at home without a teacher. It provided them a way to have very interactive activities that they were doing at home and feeding data back to the teachers. And we want to continue with that program next year. We'll experiment to whether or not we keep it again in the future beyond the 2 years. It wasn't something, we don't want kids on computers all the time learning to read using computers, but it could be that we, after this year, decide that it is a valuable tool to keep for the classroom to use as part of a rotation when kids are, the students are going in and out of working in small groups with teachers or with other kids, that one of the groups is that they're working just with the computer. So, I mean, it is a very well-known and powerful program. It does come with a significant annual expense to it, so that's part of the debate about whether, the cost benefit on it. So, we look forward to moving ahead with those 4 items and then coming back to you in the fall and giving you an update about where we're at with the selection process, and then also with the initial recommendations that are going to come from the committee. So that's my general update on where we're at so far.
Questions? Lisa, do you have questions?
I have so at first I wondered if this report is going to go out to the community. Are they going to see this, or
Well,
should we just mention everything on it?
They saw a good deal of it. I guess we could send out another version of it and say this is a big. We added some additional recommendations from the committee. We gave a committee update without having those 4 items at the end. Were not part of it when we sent it out, but. So Amber and I were talking about
I
that
don't know if we
earlier.
want to confuse people that it looks like something different. I do think that they got a really good literacy update that captured the majority of this. They'll certainly get other updates as we move forward. I mean, I think it's more just to bring you guys up to speed and to kind of codify it with the 4 recommendations, because we said we would give you, a concrete update. So I think that they have seen the pieces of this already in the literacy communication that went out.
I will say that one communication we were going to put out, and thing I failed to mention in that the committee that we're forming this summer to pick a phonics program, we want to invite parents who might be interested in participating. We want to get some gen ed, so general education, special education, and English language learner parents who might want to be a part of the process of screening the materials. So that communication will go out, which will basically, it'll highlight where we're headed to some degree. So it wouldn't look like this, but it would inform the community that that's where, about where we're headed, and offer the opportunity for parents to sign up. So that might sort of serve the purpose.
What seems so great about this is that the combination of the literacy specialists and the special education special educators, education educators, coming together with gen ed seems like that's where I should mention that I recently went to the CPAC meeting this past month where Sherry Stevens and team of coordinators, special education and reading specialists came to answer questions and present about what has been happening when it comes to literacy. So that what's really great is to see that combination sort of working together rather than in isolation. I think there's been criticism of that in the past, and it really is obsolete at this point. It's really a collaborative effort.
Absolutely. I mean, this triangle here with the tiers is really, what we use as our framework for, and it's not uncommon, it's you see it in the education literature quite frequently, but you really can't, talk in isolation about any one of these tiers. They all work together, and so the way they talk about the 80% of the students being the core, the core classroom structure instructional will be sufficient for 80% of the students using the general educational curriculum that we have. And then you get into this tier 2 where you have about 15% of your students who will need some specialized targeted small group instruction. And that specialized instruction can be delivered both by the classroom teacher and also by specialists, such as a reading specialist, or other kinds of an ELL specialist. But you can't sort of understand what to deliver in tier 2 without understanding what's still being delivered in tier 1, and you need the two to be working together. And then if the tier 2 is not sufficiently bringing the students back into the fold in terms of their pacing being at that the same as the 80%, then they may be boosted into like tier 3, which is the 5% who need a more intensive intervention. But you really, again, to have it would be at one point, we would have a red group and an orange group and a green group working separately as professionals, but this committee is very consciously constructed to have everybody together.
So we'll
talking
take a
about
look at it. I think Sherry Stevens was thinking that she wanted to send out with her next CPAC update the presentation. And so we've folded the majority of CPAC's communication into general communications because to Daniel's exact point, they're all intertwined. So it might well be that we could do a succinct, good things happening in literacy and do Sherry's update with that PowerPoint and this memo, and then Daniel's invitation for families that want to, parents who might want to participate. So we'll talk tomorrow to Sherry and see what makes sense to put together.
It also mentions that the team of reading specialists and special educators are trained in the process of DIBELS. They were
Right.
trained in 2019, 2020, so that they're ready to go. Like, I feel like they're
They're already leveraging it
yeah.
on the ground. I mean,
Yeah.
when we were visiting classrooms, you'll see them running those assessments and then, doing data. They've already added data meetings, and the data meetings are looking at that on-the-ground DIBELS and other assessment strands they collect. So yes, classroom teachers are implementers of all of that.
no, it's,
Yeah.
Oh, Kristen, I have a question. Good. Oh, you done? Sorry. You're done? Okay. I guess the question I've been asked all along, and I think I asked this last year when we talked about literacy also, was with the DIBELS program, are we finding more students that fall into the tier 1, tier 2 categories than we had in the past? And then do we have resources to service those students, especially as they go up through Mill Pond and then the middle
Yeah,
school?
I'll
Yeah,
take that one. I got one that I, like,
Go for
one of
it.
the things that's nice about the DIBELS assessment, and Lisa and I were actually talking about this earlier today, is that a well-refined assessment lets you pick up areas that could constitute later weakness. So it's preventative. So you know that there's a subset skill that if they don't get enough fixed learning at that skill, it could impact them later. Like we were saying, you're not going to do decimals well if your place value work back in first and second grade is weak. And so when you do those assessments with literacy, it's the same. So the screener lets you basically plan more targeted instruction all the time. And so it's preventative. And so when you're looking at that model, it lets you just do better instruction. So, you're picking up those small different changes in literacy skill set, and you're matching them in the classroom. So it just makes your tier 1 really robust. That's what you're looking for, is that the instructional matching is really good because of the assessment and the materials that Daniel is looking to then fold in with some of these additional core materials. I think we do pick up more kids. Because the screener is good, you pick up more skills you want to work on. So the answer is yes, you're picking up more skills you want to match and teach to. You're not identifying disabilities. You're identifying areas for instructional focus. So that's the gift of good assessment. And I think that's what we like about the DIBELS, which is why it's such an early intervention to do from kindergarten forward. So, good news.
Do we have room in the budget for the phonics program if we so choose one this summer? Should we factor that in?
Yes.
Yeah, it would come out of curriculum for FY22 out of materials that Daniel already sets aside for.
Yes.
Hopefully we get the right amount of money in
Good
there.
question, though.
Yeah, anticipated.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like a good plan to include families and parents in on the selection process. I think that's really they're a valuable resource to have their eyes on it as well, so.
Yeah. It'll be it'll be a commitment. We're asking for 20 to 30 hours, so that we have the dates established. We find that putting together these summer groups, you've got to be very specific up front. So we'll put that out soon, and people will get a chance to, a lot of it will be independent work, but there's 3 meetings that are sort of non-negotiable that people need to come together so that they understand what we're doing and how the programs operate and what the protocols are for evaluating the programs.
Great, so people can check their schedules and see if they're available.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions about the literacy update? Thank you. Thanks. Next on our agenda is a look at a draft of the annual stipend list. And Amber shared with us a list of stipend updates.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
So I've had some nice conversation with different members who had questions, and I think it's always productive to be able to, I'll try to target some of my content discussions. So the Stipend Committee meets as needed about 3 times a year, and then we work via email with questions, and then there's a management that's always in place around the implementation of all of the clubs and sports and organizational things that are running during the year that are paid stipends that relate to this particular committee. Annually, as a school committee, there is an approved list of stipends, and you update it with this memo. So the standing list of committees and activities are approved, and then this tracks the additions and subtractions in a structured way that lets us maintain kind of a culled list and then a clean list that's updated. A couple things to note. These are just all of the potential clubs and organizations that can and might run, and they are posted, and faculty apply to be the manager of that club. Whether or not then by the end of the year they are paid that stipend is judged upon whether or not the club ran, they turn in rosters, they have students signed up, they can indicate that they have, met the criteria that they were awarded the stipend for. So we do have a maintenance of effort structure that looks to make sure that the basis of the paperwork is turned in, that they have students registered in Family ID, and that there's a methodology. And then there's also then that flexibility that clubs come with that we've kind of talked about, different than the concrete structure of you're either in an a cappella group or you're not, or you're showing up at the team and you're playing or you're not. So the clubs have a little bit more fluidity, and we want them to be spontaneous, but we also need them to be tracked and organized. I believe we've hit that sweet spot, and this committee comes together and reviews that data and makes sure before, and so do the principals. They might send a question saying, I'm not sure this club ran, can we check and make sure? And then each year that comes to fruition by the close of the year, and then stipends are paid around now usually. So the other thing about that, as we look at these, is that when we're doing the stipend work, I have one other request. Let me look at everything, and then I want to talk about my request that we consider allowing pilots to be paid next year with more flexibility in a recovery year for us, and I have some purposes in that. So let's go through the part that's standard, and then we could come back and discuss that. Is that okay?
Yep.
So the approved list are noted below. You can see that there are 4 assistant varsity coaches where we felt that they were out of alignment with the other assistant varsity coaches, and when we tracked their work, really felt like the amount of work, what they were doing, and the alignment was the same. And it wanted to Do you want to amend it and cover your school committee meeting dates? That's not really relevant to a lot of other people. You could at least discuss it, and then you
Yeah,
could vote
sure.
it back on public meeting.
Okay.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, that's my recommendation.
Yes, thank you for your recommendation and for your idea.
That
Good
keeps it
idea.
going too.
Keep it going, yes. So, we looked last time at our school committee meeting dates for the 2021-2022 school year, and we found that the meeting schedule, we were looking to make an adjustment that first week in November, because Wednesday, November 3rd, is the start of the MASC-MASS conference. And this is this year going to be a hybrid conference, and so she said, okay, it's back. So we'll just continue with this.
That's
and then
fine,
go
that
back.
makes sense.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
So we wanted to change November 3rd, and so we looked early in the week. This room was not available, but Memorial Hall in the town hall is available on Tuesday, November 2nd. So we will just change that one day to be on the 2nd over at Memorial Hall. And otherwise, the rest of the schedule looked like it was going to work out and stay the same as we had looked at before. I don't know if anyone else had feedback or discussions on that. And Andrea had updated that sheet in here probably sometime today. So if you look at it again, it's updated with the Tuesday,
Daniel.
November 2nd.
Get that off.
Yep. So, all right. So I would make a motion to accept these dates for the school committee meetings for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, Sarah, we'll start off with a roll call vote.
Julia, yes?
And then yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
You're right, yes.
And Vincent, yes, 5-0. So those will be our meeting dates for next year. And we're going to circle back to what the superintendent was sharing with us about stipends and an idea for clubs for next year.
Thank you. So over the last several years, I've been watching the kind of well-managed stability of how stipends have been folded in, run, and kind of managed so that students have opportunities to participate. And we always want to encourage the growth of clubs as it gives us more opportunities for students. And we've also seen an increase in enrollment over the years. So it's been responsive and diversified in a way that I think is very healthy. Next year in particular, given that we're returning after many of us have all acknowledged that students have suffered from a sense of disconnect, we're going to be wanting as many clubs and organizations to run as possible to make sure that everybody has a chance to plug into small groups and positive things that give them the reconnection and the emotional support they need. Again, I also mentioned that there's interest in exploring the start of a robotics club potentially at Gibbons. Those as an example, I'm posing that as an example. I don't know if that will come to fruition or not, but it's always a part of that discussion when those ideas are circulating that people are wondering how much time and energy it's going to take. Those clubs are very high energy around the time. And so providing a stipend to clubs that run next year or an intramural sports group or something that runs would allow us to make sure that as many students as possible can participate while acknowledging that the staff who give their time, also having come off of an incredibly hard year, would be compensated. I would access COVID funds if necessary to pay that, if not available within the allotment of stipend funds. However, I'm also going to get a chance then to do a one-year data rotation where we can see how many clubs tend to show up. And then we can look back at the 5 years of clubs to see whether or not we could annually run a paid model where they could run for the year and be paid. Sometimes clubs exist for 2 years and then they disappear, but it was real and authentic work. And I believe that an opportunity to consider, if financially feasible, that they would be paid within that time feels logical. So the committee is interested in taking this opportunity to both run more next year for kids and then get a data assessment for whether or not that changes the motivation of how many clubs start when they're being paid too. So anyway, I would be interested in seeking your support to let the committee, in a year through SEL support of COVID return, explore paying clubs for the 1 year of recovery. And while we also then get a look at its financial and organizational management questions to see if it might be a permanent change we want to discuss. That would then come through language of negotiation or through a memo from the Stipend Committee here for your approval. I believe those are all the core content parts of the memo, and I would open it up for any discussion.
Sure.
So I do have a request that in the future, we look at all the stipends at the same time, even though we're only adding and changing. Because I think it's important for us to see the numbers, because what we're voting in is, close to $500,000. I mean, there are 251 stipends, and so it's pretty significant. So when we only see the change, we don't really realize the impact that we have on the vote. I don't bring this up because I don't agree that we should have the stipends, because I think that what makes really the fabric of Westborough Public Schools is, to a great deal, the extracurricular activities, whether it be sports, fine arts, clubs. So to look at these stipends as what really enriches the experience of going through K through 12. But I think it's helpful to see what is happening at each of the schools. The high school is fairly dominant when it comes to the stipends. I think that's important to note when we look at increasing the number of clubs, whether they're going to more clubs at the high school or more clubs at middle school, more Mill Pond, more at the K through 3s, because maybe there is a lack in the younger grades. Maybe there is more opportunity that would get kids more involved and engaged in activities that they never would have done otherwise, which I think that's a big part of Westborough Public Schools, to do things that you would normally not have been exposed to and discover that you have a new passion for it. So I am going to request that we have that in the future. We used to have it in 2018, 2017. We had the full list. And to have a total at the end. It stopped becoming a total in 2019. To see what the total is, we can add it up, but there's 250 to add up. And so, and when it comes to what you've described as adding as a part of recovery of COVID to get kids more engaged, I'm for that. I think that's a good thing. I would love to use the COVID funds versus the budget, but I also recognize that once we start something, it can flow back into the budget.
Well, I think we should keep in mind that it's not only a program for the purposes that you've discussed, which is the benefit of the students. It's not a freebie to the students. They pay, fees for the ability to have those programs. There is the period where it's a trial period as to whether or not the program actually becomes embedded in the process, and therefore the activity fees are accounted for. But I do agree with you in terms of seeing the total, not only total stipend package and the cost to the system, but also the activity fees and how they balance out against the use of each one of the clubs and programs. We allocate the activity fees in certain ways that benefit the town as well as the students. And, I think the full accounting of it is important for us to see, because it isn't just a hit against the town's budget of $500,000. There's a tremendous offset based on activity fees that we have some flexibility in how they get applied. In particular, they can be used to have startup programs, and as noted here, when a program changes or needs to be modified, there's a reduction in that stipend and a new stipend that comes along. And in fact, as you have suggested, Lisa, that in fact the pros and cons of any program, the cost and benefit of the program, should be part of a consistent package that we see from time to time, and then, as you say, we used to get that.
Yeah, there's
So I agree.
Yeah, there was a good conversation about it, and again, these are conversations that the Stipend Committee has been circulating a range of options around shifting to some intramurals, doing some other types of things. So it's an innovative committee that's responsive to both what students want and what faculty need in order to be drawn to help to participate in managing those. Middle school needs are different than high school. So I think what makes sense, and Lisa and I talked about this, like, I think the committee had already talked about this in that it's a good year to look at doing, I'll pull together basically a report where I can look at like a 3 to 5 year cycle of data. We can look at clarifying what's covered, how we run things, what the rotations are. I'm certainly happy to pull together something that next year in front of this, because it would be a proposal for some modifications and changes that might have several bullets. It's just a nice refresher update to the structure. I think that makes sense as well. So I'll just put it on our list. We'll rotate it in the spring and bring it forward as a kind of a robust summary so you can see where things are. That follows a year where we would be getting prepared to enter into negotiations. And so if there's pieces that wanted to modify, that would come to part of that process as well, potentially. So I think it's all good. The timing is right. And it also lets us look at what other towns are doing in terms of, what they're running and the balance of their types of things. And so we'll pull some of our comparables. And so, I can put something together that gives you the picture you need.
There's also, past practices and labor issues that also need to be discussed.
Right.
In other words, if we chose to change something for whatever reason, what is the labor impact of that in terms of past practice and understanding of those teachers who actually fulfill the role of club monitor or oversight, et cetera.
Right. We did also previously have a school committee member on the stipend committee. I know Nicole had did it when it was being revamped, and then I had done it for a couple of years after that, so we could reinstate. I'm not sure if it's on our committee list, but we can think about that again for the points that you're making.
Yeah, Amber mentioned that as well. I don't know if there's somebody that, whether it's on our list anymore, whether it just sort of dropped at some point. I'm curious about it myself. Just I know that in terms of teacher contract guidelines, there's an increase of that 2.5%, and in the past it was a different teacher's contract, so it was only at 2%. So that increased. And like Steve said, for the people who have been doing the club for 2 years or 3 to become added to the list, what is the fair practice about the fact that we would start and allow a year where you could be a new club and still receive a stipend? And so the question becomes, should the motion be a 1-year plan versus, a general practice from now on, because it is a different kind of year?
Well, those are all good questions, but they can't be answered here, number one. And number two, past practices will force us to continue doing what we're doing until there is first of all, a program change and an understanding of that program change with all the players. So,
Yeah, my request is only for a 1-year SEL, social emotional COVID-based intervention for those clubs to be paid in an extraordinary year where we're asking faculty to step up and cover more. I don't know how many, there might be no new clubs, you just don't know. But it also allows us the chance to explore the impact of how many new clubs come and go. But it would be paid with COVID funds, and it would be clear that it's not a new contract practice, it's a 1-year intervention in terms of the SEL percent. We're supposed to use at least 20% of ESSER 3 against SEL-based interventions. So, setting aside $3,000 for the impact of that is minimal against the 600 and whatever, but might well let us explore something, learn something, and acknowledge teachers who step up in that year, next year, where they too are also recovering from some of that, that impact. But be clear that any change in practice would be negotiated against past practice. And right now, the current design is that it has to be piloted. So, it would be a short intervention to gather data. And I certainly asked, the Stipend Committee agreed that they thought that that was logical to gather data. Bill Parsons was at that meeting in attendance, and so agreed that it feels logical for an exploration for 1 year. So it's certainly viable should we want to do it. It's a small acknowledgement, and it could be 10 people, it could be 5, it could be none. It's just planning ahead for ways to also recognize the innovation potentials of those funds and to acknowledge for teachers that step up after long work days to sustain activities for students is why the stipend structure exists. So,
With the pilot, if you're piloting a club and to be paid a stipend, would it be like a reduced stipend or just?
So we would defer, what we would do is place them into, they would apply for it, and then they would submit their roster, they would follow the same protocol, and we would look to the structure of number of meetings, and we would place them in the table for the year within their comparable, like if that robotics club runs,
Yeah.
and they have 75 kids, and those kids want to meet every day, they want to meet Saturdays, they want to meet Sundays.
Yeah.
Anybody who steps up for a robotics club, is going to be busy.
The advisors.
So, that would go in on one of the higher end stipends and, so again, we would be looking to pilot it that way and learn from what kind of impact it has in the 1 year when we have the advantage of the COVID funds. And it purposely backs up into a negotiation year where we get a look. So, that was my intent. And I think again, the goal is to be creative. It's my sense, I just want to comment on the 2.5 as we look at the past history. We have committed that for my first 3 years here, we were in recovery because they hadn't added any percentage to the stipend pool for multiple years when I arrived. And they had not budged in terms of percentage. And so we recommitted to the fact that the Stipend Committee was within that, a chunk of the stipend money was in the salary line item and should grow at that base to allow us to be responsive to our faculty. And that if you were running a sport and, you're here on Saturday game days and weekends and running night games, that you should be able to see a 2% increase in your lifetime of that stipend. We've made a nice recovery where ours are now more in alignment. The Stipend Committee looked at comparable districts when we started doing that. And I think it was my second year here, I can pull the history, where you supported the committee in place. I mean, Steve was here to re-leveling those stipends to be more appropriate to what their colleagues were making right around them, and they were really low in comparison. So they've recovered to, a comparable base. And now we've gotten into the rotation of rolling the 2% in and then having it available to. It doesn't have to be the 2.5, but it's standard practice that it should grow similarly to what's negotiated. There's years when it hasn't, and that does remain available to us as a leverage budget point if necessary. But again, I think that really was a recovery model for quite a while.
And I know because of this past year and COVID, we had reduced some of the activity fees. Will those go back to regular?
They'll go back to base.
Okay. Yep.
But I think one of the things we want to do when we look at this memo is also look at some of the structure of the fees again. We'll make sure we review those as part of it. So, I had looked at that as well, and it's a piece that I want to review. And Irene and I had talked about it. So I've already talked to Dave about it, that this would be a piece of work to do that would immerse him in it. He can see it. We'll do the study together, and it'll give him a snapshot of the history of it, so.
Great. So my understanding is we're not taking any action tonight. Do we do that at our next meeting?
No, you can do it at your next meeting.
Okay.
I think it's always fine. We had a lot of discussion. Some years you voted as it stands, and other years you want to think about it. I'm fine either way. I always give it to you so you have a meeting to reflect if there's further questions. And then, I would hope that we could then approve it by the next meeting and move forward.
Okay.
Thank you, very good discussion.
Yeah. Next on our agenda is a review of student handbooks for the next school year. And in our packet, we have those linked up there.
Yeah, so the handbooks as they stand, Mill Pond and Gibbons have only date changes and updated staffing and faculty lists. The elementary schools have some changes, and theirs is linked for you, and the high school has some changes. They made some additional changes, Lisa and I had looked at. I got editing rights earlier today, and we updated the school committee table needed to be fixed. It's now amended. I love Google Docs. And so those are before you for approval. There was one note that I think Daniel and I were talking about, and this is why I appreciate school committee reviewing them, is to make sure that the homework policy related to our religious calendar is in all of the handbooks. And so I think currently it's not in the high school handbook. And so I would amend the handbook as Brian has forwarded and request that they go ahead and fold that in as well. And I'll check to make sure that it's in all of them so that it's consistent. I think Gibbons has it in, but I
think they
have to go
do.
back and look. Gibbons is not linked, but I know Jack very clearly puts out an update before any holiday on what the guidelines are for each holiday to both families and faculty. So anyway, I will make that amendment to the high school book with Brian.
Be a good addition there. And again, we're not, we approve these at the next meeting, right?
Either one, it's fine to do them at the next meeting, yes.
Okay.
It's just, again, it's practice that you see them, you have an opportunity to react to them.
Okay.
And to review the red line changes. This year, there aren't a lot, so, I mean, I think I'm certainly happy to have the high school amend theirs, and then you could approve them in a block at the next meeting if that's comfortable for you.
Okay. Yeah, if that's okay with everyone, we'll just take a little more time to look at them and then approve them at the next meeting.
Do
Okay.
you have some changes? Do you have any changes? Do other people have changes?
I didn't have anything, but I also did a quick glance. I did notice the, what you had mentioned about the holiday homework calendar types of things weren't in the high school one.
And there was a discussion as well of just making sure that there was some policy and practice that we wanted to put some student teams together on. All of that got tabled around
Yes.
COVID. And so,
Yep.
we did no base policy change work at the high school with kids and they won't make any other updates. I don't think anybody will. I mean, Gibbons might have some changes next year as well, but not until we can get back to a baseline of normalcy. So I certainly think we can bring them forward to you earlier in the fall, earlier next year, more closer to, March, so you can see them if we have changes.
Lisa, what did you have?
I had a question about the school hours. Is that the original schedule prior to COVID? And I ask this because I feel like the morning break got later. I'm asking because if people are listening in, it's new to even the normal year. I think
Is that high school?
it's the high school. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
it's
in the
okay.
high school handbook right now, and I'm looking at school hours. Of course, the time, beginning and end are the same, 8:10 to 2:37. But it
The
looks...
periods and how they're,
It seems like the morning break went from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Totally fine. I'm just saying, is it a
So I think
change?
they'll probably, again, they might move that again. They're still looking at where they want to place it. I think it'll probably shift back to morning, but I know that until we get confirmation that we can hold lunches and what fall looks like, it stands as is. So the update on the break won't move until we have confirmation of return to normalcy for school lunch rotation.
so instead of everyone breaking at once, they'll do what they're doing now, which is the 15-minute
And it's a big
increments
change
of-
that a lot of districts are waiting to just get confirmation, and DESE won't have those guidelines probably, until the summer.
Okay.
And then there was one last thing, and that was around the dress code. A year ago, when we reviewed the handbooks, I had brought up that the use of, or the wearing of do-rags was considered a racially acceptable attire. And at that point, I thought at that point was that it would go back to the high school for a thoughtful review process. And it's understandable that it may not have at this point, it may have, but it is still, the dress code in terms of that specific item is exceptions may be made for items worn due to religious or medical circumstances. And so I'm bringing it back again because, there are many aspects that affect fewer kids, but still are impactful. And I think that this is one of them, and it was brought up by citizens prior to our handbook committee last year. And I think it should be reviewed to just look for what is the exception in that case. Is there an exception in that case that can be worded in a way that allows for it to not feel like a partial or biased, piece of the dress code? And that's all I'm really asking. I'm not, saying that we need to have a total overhaul, because it seems like a policy or review that's been perfectly in place for a long time that's worked. But that's the piece of it that I think should be reviewed.
So we know Brian's watching, so I'm sure Mr. Callahan is duly noting that, they need to, I know that they had made some changes to the dress code and I know that there is active discussion about further modification and review. So, obviously you see a lot of school districts that are always kind of coming back. There's been a couple things in the news lately. So it's always an active process. And so I think you can be confident that they'll put something in front of you after a thoughtful review.
And I do think that was one of the areas we wanted a team of students to take a look at, and it just couldn't happen because of everything that happened in the spring, and this year just not having the time to pull a group together to have the attention
Yeah, I think
on it,
it's
so.
in reach, and I think it needs to be part of a full range of conversation, so it doesn't, happen in a context that also, just drops in there. I think there's, it's a better, richer, more purposeful conversation and process when it fits into a healthy framework of the things you're doing in your school year.
Yeah.
So,
I also want to thank the principals, Brian, if you're listening, and Marianne, and all the other principals. The fact is, the handbooks are far supreme compared to where they were even a few years ago, and why technology, the links, just simplify the whole process of looking for what you're looking for. And they've been reorganized, especially in the last 2 years. There was a lot of work done a couple of years ago that brought them to a much more manageable document and more consistent. The K through 3s across the board to look exactly alike to a certain extent, besides the specifics of that school or that building. So good work to all of them for putting in the time. And
thank you.
they're also, one of my suggestions has been, I could have sworn my son may have said that he was reviewing the Gibbons handbook as part of a class. And I thought, did you find anything we should review? And he didn't. So there was a part of me that thought this would be a really good exercise in document review, is for students to review the handbook. And even though they sign off that they have read it every single year.
Homework for families.
I know. The question is, have they really read it? And would they question any of those, processes that would say, well, that's not quite what happens.
Well, we do leave the legal responsibility in their hands where it is properly placed, that they own that responsibility, so that should they miss that, it's on them and not me. So, they're given the handbook to sign off on for a legal reason, and because it is a legal document for many protocols. And so I certainly understand, and we will encourage them to take a good, robust look at it.
Yes. And the athletic handbook, that's also a sign off that you've read the athletic handbook before being on a team.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you.
All
All
right,
right, thank you.
Moving on, we need to do an update to our face coverings policy, EBCFA. And so there, because of the change of guidelines, there's a small piece in here that is recommended, a piece of language that we now drop from this policy. So if you remember, we adopted this policy in probably August or in the fall. And so based on mask guidelines that we have now, I don't know if,
And this policy?
yeah. So
Page
actually, just
17.
right there is perfect. So where you have the second set of bullet points, where it says additionally, face masks or face coverings will not be required when appropriate social distancing is enforced, we can drop the language when appropriate social distancing is enforced. Because students now can be outside during mask breaks, while eating or drinking, during physical education classes, and while they're outside, do not need to have face masks or face coverings.
And don't need to be socially distant anymore.
Right.
Right, they don't need the social distancing piece.
So are you then going to put a colon after required and then drop the rest of the sentence?
Yes, we could. So it would say additionally, face masks or face coverings will not be required. And the one question I did have for you, Amber, is here it says during physical education classes. So I know some of our PE classes are in gymnasiums, some are outside.
These
So
all refer to outside.
these all refer to outside. So during physical education classes, I would like to add the word outside.
Okay.
Okay.
I would say during outdoor physical
During outdoor
education
physical
classes.
education classes. Okay.
But could they, oh no, forget it, sorry.
What?
I was gonna say, if they stayed socially distanced inside during PE, could they drop their mask to breathe for a second or whatever, but
Yeah, I mean, I think they're making those allowances, like, as
Yeah.
needed to get a sip of water or whatever.
right, I think they're pretty much outside, but.
Yeah, but I think it would be important just to say that it applies to the outdoor classes, that the ones in the gymnasiums should still. All right, so I'm going to make a motion for us to strike out the part of that sentence that says, when appropriate social distancing is enforced, and to add the word outdoor, so it'll read during outdoor physical education classes.
Second.
Any other discussion about that? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Julia, yes?
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durrett, yes.
And Vincent, yes. So thank you for that update. I'll let Andrea know about that. And we are now to our last agenda item, which is.
Oh, wait, sorry, I had a question about the second part of that was, I think it says until follows requirements are in place until further notice. I was just wondering about like the fall, if, I know, like we can obviously have a meeting over the summer, we have in the past too or whatever, but if we, and then we have the meeting in August, but.
Yeah, we can revisit this at our first meeting, but it does say that this policy will remain in place until rescinded by the school committee.
That's
So
what I was
that would also have to come from state guidance to tell us that like masking isn't anything that we need to be doing indoors, outdoor,
Okay,
So
so it
this-
could sit for the summer or until other guidance came in and then we could,
Yeah, which also relates to the question that was asked during citizens'
Right.
request about summer programs. So this can apply to like our school buildings. So kids go outside during summer programs, they won't have to wear their mask, back inside, put it on, so.
So I hear what Sarah's saying, though. If this,
Well, it
If
would
the policy
convene,
changes.
you would
In
have,
summer,
you
they
have an
say.
August meeting before the start of school. So it would be one of your first items
okay.
on the August agenda. So Kristen, we just make sure we roll it to the August meeting. And you guys would serve with an updated policy that would allow us to be in a place for opening that's in alignment with current guidelines.
And if we have to meet before then in order
I
to
know,
do something like that, obviously we can, but, yeah.
Well, it remains to be seen, if the governor drops the emergency orders relative to the pandemic in, what was it, June 20th or something he was talking about? Certainly by July.
Yeah,
Whether or not that basically says, okay, the rules are back to normal. Or whether there's still an impending discussion from the State Board of Health, the local boards of health. So at that point, as Amber suggests, we could pick up anything that's left over, depending upon what the outcome of the governor's orders are in June and July.
But if the summer program begins on July 6th, one of them, would that change
Right.
how you would respond to that?
I
summer
don't
program?
think that, so currently our practice would be masks on inside as we currently do at school, and outdoor the mask guidelines are dropped as noted. And I think that would be the current practice through the summer until we get to an update. If they did some large change where they thought that those summer programs could change, I'd certainly make a request to convene you should we need to.
Okay.
We can only convene after the change has been made.
Right.
Can't anticipate when
Right,
it's
right.
going to be done.
Right, I mean, I think, you could, to Sarah's point, you could make a motion to allow me to act in your stead against CDC guidelines throughout the summer, with then an updating of the policy taking place when we come back together. If
We
you
did that at
want,
the last meeting. Didn't we do that at the last meeting?
yeah, I think that you did, but we still hadn't updated this policy. I can go back and look. I mean, I think I have the authority to update along the CDC guidelines, but before we open school fully in the fall, we would update this policy.
Okay. And Governor Baker just filed legislation to extend certain COVID-19 emergency measures, which apply to municipal governments. So we may be able to meet virtually over the summer if we needed to.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's,
So
yeah.
That's easy enough.
that would be helpful, just finding a time to get together if we had to do it, knowing that we could still meet virtually. He was thinking about extending it into November or September 1st. So these provisions in terms of bodies needing to meet quorum requirements and having meetings held remotely, he's thinking about extending it through September 1st, even if the state of emergency ends in June. So that will be good for us to have if we need to meet and we're in different places in the summer. Okay,
Great.
thanks. All right, so now, this is another piece of the superintendent's review process. And Amber, every year, the superintendent creates goals and self-assess mid-year and at the end of the year. And so we're going to hear from Amber on her assessment of her goals. And this is one piece of information that we use in our evaluation of the superintendent.
Thank you. So I certainly think, I mean, this document is mostly for you to read and reflect, and so I won't drag you through all the component pieces of it. I know you can read it. And it's for you to have my voice around aspects of my work. I also would indicate that my survey is out to faculty, and currently I have 217 people who have responded, and there's a good, robust range of comments. So I'll probably wait until Friday, and then I'll snapshot all the content out and the bar graphs and send them to you so you guys can reflect on those. So I'll just pull everything out and give it to you. And you can use those as well. I like to give it as long as possible for people to have time to contribute so we get the most robust participation. I've been watching them as they come in, so I certainly, some of my reflections, capture some of that. So certainly you see my introduction just noting the fact that this was the mid-year summative of my work, and then I basically, you just need to read the pink. Like, just go to the pink, go to the happy color. Just read the pink. You want to read the introduction that I provided, that just captures the fact that, I acknowledge to you that this year has been, I think for me, characterized by the immense stratification of people's feelings. And that we experienced that across all of the groups that we work with. Students had a wide array of very intense feelings, parents, the community, and faculty. And so, in my introduction there, if you just scroll to the top for just a second, Daniel, there, we acknowledge that the outcome of what that meant for us was that any decision we made was going to leave, no matter what, at any given time, of core people, not just mildly dissatisfied, but very upset because of the intensity of everyone's feelings. So I certainly, just want to acknowledge that, for me, it left people feeling disappointed or disapproving of aspects of our work and of my work as superintendent continually on a cycle through the year that was very challenging. That said, we also had a wide array of people who stepped forward to make sure that they were communicating their support. And I think both were very true. And I think that's really what I want to acknowledge, that every single one of those feelings was understandable, and the ideas and opinions were valid and important. And that just meant that we were going to suffer that bell curve of response all year. For me, I just want to acknowledge that, one student, one faculty, or one parent dissatisfied with our efforts and my leadership is too many. And I take this work personally. It's work I care deeply about. I care about it not in a personal way of like being upset for me, but personal because I care about satisfying our constituents. And so the distress for me in my role this year was in knowing that there were people that were dissatisfied or unhappy with our decisions. And that was, a hard mantle to wear because I do care deeply about satisfying our clientele. And that clientele for me is worn equally between our colleagues and our faculty, our parents and our students. And so, I think from that year, I just think it's important to recognize that I want to acknowledge that despite all of that, I continue to feel that the leadership team and the faculty in Westborough, myself inclusive of that, did exceptionally well through all of this. And I can't say that I think the faculty and the leadership team did a phenomenal job with excluding myself, and then because the bottom line is I'm part of that team. And I lead that team, and I remain exceptionally proud of the work that we've done. So I've tried to capture that in some of my comments that you can read and reflect on. I think it's a year where it's probably worth reading what I wrote to understand my feelings about it. And then I gave you a summation of kind of each of the core goal areas. And I indicate if I met the target, if it's below target, or I missed the target, or if I exceeded it. So you see where I was mid-year in red, and then you can see the overall target of navigating and leading through COVID. I believe that I met that target. There were areas where I was below target, communication and responding quickly to the changes in the model. I think that people felt we could have changed more quickly, and I want to be aware of that. I felt that we met the targets. I feel like we exceeded the budget expectations and the strong implementation of the SEL goals. I feel like that's a very accurate assessment of the year and how we responded across the array of experiences that it captured. I think that if you talk to faculty, they would echo, and parents would echo the same, that they would have wanted communication differently or more rapid information. Like that was kind of the synopsis of, so I note those as below target. I think you can read my summarization of that phase and that work and what it did. I think we all learn from experiences, and I'm looking forward to the time to reflect and stepping back on how we could have seen certain things to respond more quickly or to layer in different types of communications. But I think for my own personal performance, I think what I feel good about is none of it was stagnant. We responded all year, and we continued to try to modify the work we were doing or the way we were responding people to continually try to be responsive to the feedback we were getting. And I think that's what good work is to just give your best effort to continue to respond to the feedback you're receiving and to try to improve your work. And I believe we did that. The other stuff I just noted and read, like all the stuff that's in the boxes was the mid-year feedback on what we were working on. And it's easy to forget what we got done and what things we were doing. And so I left them there for you to reflect on if you want, but you don't need to reread those. So don't feel like that document has to be too long for you. If you look at Standard 1 instructional leadership, I indicated that I felt I was proficient that year in that work. We were able to maintain some important target goals for instructional leadership despite the fact that we were in a pandemic. I established a new target goal that I shared with you at the mid-year report for the strategic plan, was able to bring forward to you a model of the strategic plan for the diversity-based equity goal. And I think that was well received by you in that work and the layout of what that strand priority is looking like. That will be the roadmap we use as we bring forward the other changes to you. And the target date to have a completed strategic plan for you in September is on target. I remain very excited, as is the leadership team, about the opportunities to develop that work. It has grounded certainly my leadership stretch with you as the superintendent of schools and was the anchor I used to move us through the work that we've shared over the last 7 years together, and I am excited by the opportunity to develop the next plan. You heard Dave refer to it. It was one of the things that inspired him to want to come to the district, so I look forward to what will be in that plan. I think we were on target for continuing around inclusive practices. Again, we lost some headway because of the strangeness and fragmentation of instruction in general. But we've got a good recovery structure in place there. You can read my reflections on that on your own. I think that, Sherry did a really good job, as did Daniel, to keep pushing forward the most essential curriculum initiatives that kept our teachers focused on the most core things to teach with kids this year in a crisis. And I think we'll see that responsively in how well we do with our MCAS, our return, and where our kids are in the fall. If you scroll down to, and again, I give you a summation just in pink on each of those core goals when you go past them. Around the standard of management and operations, I noted that as exemplary. Again, I can't acknowledge and say that the leadership team was exemplary, and I can't hold myself outside of that group because I lead that group and I'm core to that group. And when I look at the management and operation of the district and what's inclusive of it, that would be the arena where I feel like the extraordinary work it has taken over the last year and a half to maintain the district is nothing short of, I would say exemplary for us in terms of the work we've done. I could put in the word exhausting, which would be the other E word I would use.
It should be a new category.
There should be a category of like how exhausted you are by each goal.
Exhaustion level.
I think few people, again, schools in particular, hospitals, the level of moment-to-moment work that we have lived under for the last year and a half is really extraordinary, and I think the district did very well. Inclusive of that, you realize there are also all the other operational management pieces that I am in charge of. We've successfully brought forward smart, thoughtful, strategic budgets. I own that, and I am good at it, and I've maintained us at a very strong fiscal leverage over my time as your leader, and certainly through a time of challenge with multiple funding sources and extraordinary costs flooding us without much planning. And we've been able to shepherd our way through that successfully And I am that anchor, and I think served you well this year in terms of budgeting. If you look to the, and again, I summarize a little bit of that for you. And then in the standard of family and community engagement, I noted that as proficient. There's areas where we exceeded. I felt very good that I maintained my participation on the master plan committee to represent the public schools to the master planning project, which, was a good amount of work. And certainly my participation on the CAP committee was extensive, and I met that. And I have sustained, again, a reactivation of more work with Westborough Connects, both as their board member, but as a just participant to that organization, being well supported around the fact that they share the common mission and goals that we would otherwise have to run all our own independent programming for, and instead we partner with them so that it's not just school-based programming, but community-based programming shared to all, as you see with the race-based film that we're participating in shortly. I mean, that's because I'm paying attention, I leverage that, I call them, we want to be sponsors, and that's work that I own that I want you to be aware of. So I put some other notations in there for you. And then around professional culture, I feel, again, I believe in the overall global work of that. You can't be as committed to relationship work in Westborough as we are as a leadership team and not indicate that that's proficient. But the wounded relationships are raw, and the real sense of some people being shattered by this experience and their sense that I defeated them or abandoned them or was in opposition to them are real and true feelings, both on parents' perspectives and on faculty's perspectives. That said, those are the same feelings being suffered by everybody that sits in this seat across the state. So I haven't talked to a single colleague who doesn't feel the same perspective of what this year was in the model of leadership we had to live through. And I believe that we did it with a proficiency beyond what many organizations do and managed it collaboratively with a lot of stakeholders. So I indicated that I met that target. I felt like I definitely have arenas where I neglected WLT and the leadership on the ground in terms of being able to give them enough focus because we just had a lot of moving parts. So I feel like that was below target personally to my focused attention with that leadership team and the supervision I usually do with them. And then lastly, I just gave you an overall, my self-assessment is an overall proficiency rating this year against those areas. And I want to close by just noting that, this faculty performed exceptionally well. They need time to rest. I think the community needs time to rest. And I look forward to returning and digging into next year. So I think there's good content for you to reflect on there if you just want to spend some time reading the pink content. And I will send you the survey results. I'm going to give them through the weekend because some people do take the weekend to do that work. And then I'll share that data with you as well. And there's a rich array of faculty comments that you can draw upon as well.
Thank you.
And that's my update.
Thank you. And if anyone is reading through Amber's self-assessment and you have questions, feel free to reach out to her directly. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them for you.
I'm very happy to meet with you individually if you have areas you want to delve more deeply.
Sure.
So.
And I sent out an email today to the team with the superintendent evaluation form. And I would like that completed by Monday, June 7th, and a list of all of the sort of data points that you have available to you. And this self-evaluation is one of them. We'll have the faculty feedback. We've received a lot of parent feedback over the school year, and so certainly please use that also in your evaluation just to help inform, feedback that we've gotten from the community and from families.
I can also, Daniel and I talked about this, just a matter of kind of going back through the flood of work, but I can pull some of the other survey. I can pull comments from when we did, we've done a lot. We did 2 open forums where we took active live questions with Westborough TV. There's a lot of content from that, feedback you received from that. The surveys we did with families, but also with faculty in November. I'm happy to share any of that if you want to dig back through that data, if you want a memory tickler on any of that, we can send you those links.
Yeah, it should be linked into the packets at some,
I think they are. I mean, we gave you them, yeah.
Yep. So the race survey data that we did and the reopening surveys, I think provided a lot of information for us as well
I
from
think
families.
it is. It's
so.
where I go and look for them as well. They're right there for you, and if you look at those links, if you open up the agenda, you can find them.
Okay, and we have just, obviously also our observations and interactions of Amber working in the district and at our meetings and things.
And during the last school committee meeting, I think Daniel pulled up the framework description. I don't know what it's called, the
Evaluation?
it's
The rubric, you
evaluation
mean the rubric? Yeah.
rubric.
Yes, yeah.
I find that very helpful to go through while I'm doing it, to be reminded of exactly what each part 1, 2, 3, 4, what the standards really are. Especially when it's proficient, what the levels. I thought
Yeah, and this year in the evaluation, that information is at the top of the form. So in the Google form, you'll see it says exemplary, proficient, whatever those 4 categories are, and the description taken from the state is there. So I also have to have it in front of me when I'm, thinking about that. So it's very helpful. And I know there's been updates to that form as well, so I grabbed some of the updated language. So hopefully,
Thank you for adding that.
So if you have questions along the way, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Amber. Steve, anything?
Yeah, I think, the idea that you can create a form as we're talking about and react to it and parse the response, item by item, line by line. I guess I would like to offer these, let's say, generic comments in regards to this whole process. The first one is that a 360-degree review is probably the hardest review anybody can ever perform, particularly if you have to do it for yourself. And the inputs that you've experienced over this year, when you think of the fact that there's potentially 12 to 20,000 critics of your work day in and day out for the whole duration of the pandemic, that the fact that we're all still here is pretty amazing, I think. And so the public review and evaluation that you spoke to, is certainly important to the work and the job. The fact that superintendents throughout the Commonwealth survived this period with all of the problems that we had, and you had to perform. I mean, many people in their jobs basically were not out in public or seen, and the performance reviewed every day. And of course, as we know, there's some reasonable people, some unreasonable people, and some really amazing people that are out there. And in fact, you were subject to their comments day in and day out. If we think about the public response to the performance of the school system, which basically is you and all the players that work here, the school budget was voted unanimously, almost unanimously at town meeting, and no required presentation was asked for. I think that speaks quite highly to our whole process during this year, and particularly to your performance in doing so. There was a unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen to support the budget. There was a unanimous vote of the Finance Committee to support the budget. There was more than average support of the Capital Expenditure Committee for the warrant articles that were presented at town meeting, including one that we didn't present, but still will be dealt with based on funding that's available to us in the school district. And so, lastly, the people that work with you and for you, as well as our own experience here as members of the school committee, the fact that the faculty, in the middle of a pandemic, they were concerned, they had opinions, they had differing opinions in terms of policies and other strategies that we were trying to perform. But I think in the final analysis, the process and the performance that was created for the Westborough School District was seen as being, in my opinion, exemplary from around the state. And for people that couldn't react as fast as this school system did to provide the best education we could under the circumstances. And the fact that individuals within the administration stepped up to deliver equipment and capability to families and kids who otherwise would not have been able to participate, I think speaks highly for this whole system. And as you have certainly mentioned, that you are, in effect, the team leader for a team that, in my opinion, performed probably, I guess I'll use the word exemplary again, certainly way above average, and for those other cities and towns in the Commonwealth that didn't do as well, it's unfortunate, but we, as a school committee and the administration, delivered every day as much as we could to maintain the status of education for our kids, irrespective of all the problems, irrespective of the comments of many in regards to how we did it. But I think in the final analysis, when we look back on this time, say a year from now, we'll be able to say we did a good job. And I'll take a little bit of credit because we stood behind you to get you there. So anyway, those are my open comments for this. And I look forward to the rest of the information you will provide.
Yeah.
Well said, Steve. Ditto.
Thank you.
Well, I'll forward the additional items to you, and I appreciate that you take time to reflect. You're as tired as everyone else, so don't feel like you need to write a book. But I think that, your reflections are taken to heart and guide me, so thank you. I look forward to our next meeting. We'll be able to summarize that, and we're almost to the end of the year, you guys. You have one more meeting. You can do it, so.
That's right.
All right.
So that does bring us to the end of our agenda, and the next meeting of the school committee will be on Wednesday, June 9th at 6 p.m., and that is the last meeting for the school committee of the school year. A motion to adjourn?
I move the motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you,
I
Raghu.
second.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll do a roll call vote.
Julia, yes?
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Durant, yes.
Vincent, yes, 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.